And I'd like to, for people, I don't know if everyone can get around the, we have a lot of exercises and things like that, and proofreading transcripts. Oh, I see. No, I'm not talking nets. It's Nicole. I mean, it's Crystal. Okay. Okay. But anyway, Regina, was it? No, it was Dr. Harris, Clarissa, who was asking me about what did I mean? What did we mean when we said that we wanted the interviewers or the videographers part of our development team? Is that what you? Okay. That's absolutely critical, because we view development as fundraising. And so each history maker is an opportunity for us to raise additional money. Now, we don't mix it. You know, we don't go in asking people to fund. That is like no-go. We don't even, the year that we are honoring people, though it's the honors are sort of getting out of control. Crystal, can you grab the award for me in there? But we don't in the year that people are being honored, or that, you know, if we have a presentation and people have been coming here, you can pass it around. This is our award that we give out, and it was developed by an artist named Preston Jackson, who had actually sat in on the evening with Harry Belafonte and was moved. And so he developed it. It's on a slave ship. She's sort of emerging, telling her story. She doesn't have a name. You know, we need to have a naming contest, but she doesn't have a name. Historia. Okay. That's not bad. So anyway, she's heavy. You know, I've always said that's all we have to have is one of the hitmakers kills. I know. We'll go there. Or killing someone. I know. Don't. I know, but it's really heavy. But anyway, it's 13 ounces of, you know, solid bronze. But what we mean, because this is not a thing, even with our sponsor, History Maker, people cannot buy their way in. And that's why when I said, you know, when Jenny Lagun called and said, you know, that she had read about us and did we know about her, I'm like, but she was legit, you know. And so that's what we mean. It's from the moment you come in to the place. It's really keeping your eyes and ears open about who could be potential supporters, whether it's donations, because we need, you know, whether it's equipment or meals for the staff or putting up crew. Amy, during the early, you know, our early time in Washington, you know, carted us around and put us up, and she held several dinner parties for us. And all those things are extremely important. You know, a project like this has to be really built from the ground. And without the, you know, sort of individual support, even the sourcing has to be done from the ground. This is not where you sit on a ledge and sort of look down. And those projects that are like that have to be somewhat surface level, because enough is really not known about our history out there. So, yes?
I had another question to follow up. So we were looking, let's say at the Atlanta market in 2004. You know, if I've understood correctly, you're looking to do about 100 interviews in the Atlanta market in 2004.
How many?
About 100?
Yes, 100.
About 100 in our market for 2004. Would we as the interviewers be put in a position where we're looking to do the development to be able to facilitate those?
We want you, what we want you to do is help us source things, like tell us in that market who is funding, you know, who is possible, what you've observed or heard, you know, because there are people that we got well, up until yesterday, we had our single largest contribution. Our single largest contributions up until yesterday had come from individual history makers. 2 years ago, I got a check at the end of the year, unsolicited, and I was looking, it was 2,500, I was so excited. I didn't know who it was, and I'm looking. And then I finally, someone says, look at the signature line. It was Ossie Davis. And then this year, we had interviewed someone named Willie Leftwich, who's a lawyer who I met. And I called him all excited because I said, oh, you're the highest contributor. And he was 7,000. Yesterday, we got our single largest contribution of 25,000 from an individual. So it's those things that are really, really important. You can't do a project like this without, funding. And so, there are people who want to be, I'm an academic, or I'm an interviewer, or I'm a documentary film producer. I don't raise funds. But the project can't exist that way, and it has to exist beyond one person. I love raising money. I'm good at it. I don't mind asking. I'm not shy. If people say no, I just look at it as an opportunity for yes.
Right.
I tend to be a little pushy, as they said to me in the Boulay Foundation, you're pushy, but they gave me 25,000. So,
just to get rid of it.
But no, they want to be supportive. So what I'm saying to you is that each opportunity, each contact, and us building sort of our base, but we're really trying to win friends out here. Like the other day, I had someone who actually is a history maker call and say that he wanted to donate some securities. We're really big on that because that can help, grow the organization and help with an endowment sort. So those are the types of things that are important. So we're not expecting you, and I'm going to talk a lot about messaging because it's absolutely critical. I would say in 95% of the time when I've sat down to interview someone, you have a lot of pressures. You're trying to get things done. People don't know you, put on the makeup. And I get myself in a whole space. But the thing is I always ask, how much do you know about the project? And I would say most times they say they don't. And so I go and and people think, well, that's odd. Haven't they signed the release? Didn't they read the correspondence? But I take that opportunity to message, just real quickly. But it's really important. It's important that we be consistent because people really don't have a clue. A lot of times people have been interviewed. They haven't done an oral history interview, and they haven't done, let's say, a life oral history interview. We are on, UCLA and Columbia, but UCLA, their average interview was 5 to 15 hours. That has been the trend with life histories, that they will occur over a period of even months. That trend is even changing. They're starting to relook at that, and they're going to fit more within the category of our interviews, 3, 4, 5, hour interviews. But in the process, realize a lot of times people haven't talked about themselves. So that's, it's a different experience. And so you're really, you have a very short period of time to assess that person, establish them. I'll talk a lot about this more tomorrow, and develop a relationship with them. I want to turn it over to Crystal. Crystal, here.
Excuse me. I handed out to everyone some materials. What I do is, as I mentioned earlier, is I schedule the interviews, and as interviewers and videographers will be dealing with me, and also the regional coordinators will be dealing with me as far as making sure the interview gets captured, and also the process of capturing the interview from start to finish. Earlier today, I gave you a list of history makers across the country, one list that didn't have any contact information, and another list with contact information. What I do is I try, with the list, with both lists, I try to contact the person and send a letter, which is this first letter here, reaching out to them for an interview. And from that, from that they either agree or they disagree to do the interview. And then that's where all the magic begins. Then in the package, I give them the release form and questionnaire, and also some background materials like the media kit, which is what you all have. And it's very important when you do the interview to get the release form, because we can't use the interview without the release form, because it gives us the permission to do so. And that's all mentioned actually in this. The whole process is mentioned in identifying, processing, and interviewing a history maker. On our website, if you've noticed, there's a nominate a history maker section, and we get a lot of our nominations through there, but also through people we've dealt with, such as yourselves, and also sponsors, and just people who call us and see our website or see our programs and say, hey, you should interview this person, and we check it out and we contact them based on their age and based on what they've done through their life. On the first page of this document, identifying, processing, and interviewing a history maker, it has a definition of a history maker, which is broadly defined as a history maker is an African American by descent, and is defined as someone who, by his or her own accomplishments, have made significant strides in his or her own life. Oh, sorry, it's this document. And a history maker may also be someone who's associated with a particular movement or organization or association that was influential in African American communities, such as the Pullman Porters or Negro Baseball League players and so forth. And we're trying to interview those who are who are older, so that we make sure we capture those stories. And then also once we'll go through this throughout the week. But I have a filing system by location, by state, and then by city of history makers and people who we've contacted, articles, and so forth. And that helps me to know who we have in a particular region, such as like DC. I know all the people we have in DC who are potential, and that gives us that gives me a scope of who we have in our pool as far as our regions are concerned. And then also what you'll be working on tomorrow is research, which is very important as far as for the interviewer, because we need like background research done on each history maker. And in order to have a good interview, we have to have the research, and that includes having a completed questionnaire if possible, but if that's not possible, then we have, we do internet research and we read the books that the person has written. If they've written a biography or autobiography, we like to have that read before we do the interview. And that's all compiled in their folder, which is listed by their name. Like if we were interviewing Jane Doe, we would have Jane Doe's name and all the information, press clippings, bio information, the questionnaire release form, all of that would be in their folder. Yes?
Crystal, how does the interviewer get that information? Do you mail that information to the interviewer or email it, or how does the interviewer?
Well, actually, the interviewer will do that information. They will do the research, and that's what you'll be doing tomorrow.
Right, okay.
And then basically I will schedule the interview, and then from there you would take it and do the research for the interview.
Right, so you'll let the interviewer know you're interviewing Jane Doe on Tuesday at such and such time.
Right.
And
And it's,
okay.
And then you would do the research on that person.
Sure.
And also, depending on staffing, we could possibly maybe help, but ideally we want the interviewer to do that research for the person.
And what's the typical turnaround time from like the time that you notified the interview or about the interviewee?
Well, that's you mean, and we do the interview?
Well, I'm just wondering, like, could there ever be a situation where you find out that you're interviewing someone, just a couple of days in advance?
Oh, yes, and even that same day,
well,
depending on if that's a cancellation.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if there's a book or that kind of thing, then.
Well, yeah, that time, in that situation, we play it by ear.
Sure.
Usually, it depends on the situation. Usually, I try to have interviews done at least like a week ahead of time. Sure. But a lot of, especially when we go out into the regions, we have interviews that come up that same day.
Right.
And then in that case, we may try to do the research, quickly as possible.
Right.
And in that case, if like you're on the road and you can't do the research, we may try to help you out and try to get that information to you. Right.
Okay.
But obviously, it may be difficult to get a book in that time.
No, sure.
Sure. But we, that is the case.
Okay.
And that's why also, if you read the interviewer guidelines, it says that we would like our interviewers to be flexible, because that happens a lot often.
Sure.
Because it's based on the person's schedule, someone may cancel, we may find someone else, and
Right.
we like to make sure that we can do the interview.
Thanks, Chris.
Also, when that does happen, sometimes while you're there and the videographer's setting up, there will be maybe opportunities to kind of talk to the subject and maybe
Right,
tactfully
right,
find
right.
out if they have a resume or
Yeah,
something
sure.
like that. And
Sure.
that can actually be really valuable. Even things that you find in their office or their home will give
Right.
you
And
lists
also-
of questions you can ask.
And also, you know, also I try to get that information from the person, either them to fax it or to email it to us. So if, you know, it's someone last minute, if they can email that to us, the sooner we get it, you know, then I can forward it over to
Right.
you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I've asked receptionists and secretaries, beaters, and I was telling you on the archive room, I had a couple of people, I had to read the laws of office.
Right.
To figure out, you know, what they were, who they
Yeah,
were, what they were
sure.
doing, you know. Walk around and read the brochures and,
And awards and that.
you know.
So, is there anything else? There's also, Speakers Bureau is also what I'm charged with, and that's a separate project than this, the scheduling. And what it is we have different speakers. Our history makers are speaking before groups and organizations, which is different than our education institute. We're working with UIC Extension, which is it's on the south side of Chicago, and it's mostly seniors. And our history makers are speaking before the group each month. And that's been successful. That was launched last year, and it's continuing throughout this year. Also, we have received requests from other organizations. They check our website, and they're interested in having our history makers come and speak before their groups, as you know, across the country as well. And then this is also for a fee too, for the history makers, and also for the history maker as well. And also Julie is speaking before groups, as Nicole mentioned earlier, across the country and during Black History Month especially, and that's also a part of our Speakers Bureau as well. That's about it.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Do you have a sample schedule you handed out?
Well, I
It's
noticed
in
it had a
It's
lot
in
of.
here.
It's in
Yeah.
there?
It's,
New York.
it says New York,
Oh, yeah, it's in the package.
yeah,
Like
it's
page
this one
5.
we're doing.
Yeah. And also there's a sample questionnaire there too.
Right.
Did you talk about the questionnaire?
Yes, I talked about the questionnaire, and that's also important, as I mentioned, as far as doing background research. And that information, the questionnaire and release form, I try to get from history makers before the interview. A lot of times they stall, and then you have to get it
Yeah.
a lot often when they're there. But just to make note that it is very important that we get the release form before tape is even rolled.
Right. Now, what about the questionnaire? I understand the importance of the release form, but how
The questionnaire is extremely important.
It's extremely important.
Okay.
It becomes part of the archival record, and the thing about, we had, one of the people who's going to be visiting us this week is Tony Burrows, who's a leading Black genealogist, and he consulted with us on the development of the form. You know, I had looked, you know, this is one of the things, I looked at the Shoah Foundation, and they had a 40-page form. So we started out with a 12-page form.
Wow.
And so I thought we were doing good, and we find that people find this daunting, and they want to know if we're with the FBI, and
Right.
what are we doing with this material, and you know, why do we need it, and it's sort of a hassle. Amy knows. And we've tried all kinds of things. We've done things where we didn't fill it, you know, we would take it with us to the interview. Then people said, no, you should have sent this beforehand.
And trying to get them to fill it out, you know, try to ask them the questions during the interview a little bit.
Right, now, our historians, our scholars have told us that it's very important that if we don't have the questionnaire filled out, that we use the interview as a way of also integrating those questions in if they're not filled out. And because I was complaining about, you know, it's really hard, we try, you know, and we just can't get people to do it. We're committed, Edward has, you know, we're trying to do something where we're going through and correcting our bios and things like that, to take that opportunity to get that filled out and make it part of our record. We have a system called FileMaker Pro where a company had developed it for us. It still needs some work. There's a tracking system, you know, that would track all our process from the interview all the way through. And so a lot of the fields were related to the questionnaire. So we would have, you know, electronic record of that. It's really, you know, there's a lot of interesting biographical data that comes as a part of it that's really interesting. And I personally find the beginning part of the interviews fascinating because you can read up to the wazoo about a person, but very little is really known about their background, their family background, and it sort of changes the course of things because there are all these sort of surprises that come out, you know, in the early part of learning about someone's life. Like I remember, we haven't finished Ramsey Lewis's interview, but I remember that he brought all these photos. So we have this whole process. We start with Julian Bond. You saw his interview. Actually, Matthew was on that. I think that, I don't know how, but anyway, we had decided we were going to have people bring photos of themselves and have them narrate them because a lot of people, there weren't photos, and you know, I was at that time trying to get the Tribune to give us access to the photo archive, and they were like, forget it, you know, or even help us do background research on people through, you know, because they keep, for people dying, whatever it's called. So they, you know, they have write-ups on people, so they wouldn't even do that, right, the obituary section. And so, so we started doing it with Julian Bond, and that was really sort of helpful. But I have found the questionnaire, back to that when I've had nothing, you know, like not much has been written about a person, you know, can't find anything, the Who's Who book that has and that questionnaire, one of the two, I can like rock and roll. But without that, it's hard. And, you know, I plan tomorrow to show you how to sort of mind that, you know, how to sort of look for pieces of information and sort of brief an interview. So you're going in with some sense of things. And, you know, we talk about the who in terms of, you know, I've constantly said, you know, who should we be interviewing? Who should we be interviewing? Darlene Clark-Hine, who's on our advisory board, this summer said to us, don't focus so much on the who. That's not the question you should be asking. You should be asking yourself region by region, decade by decade, what is the important history in that region, and who was the important in making that history, and that's how you should go about it. So that's what we need to do, you know, with this. But realize, you know, we're in a race against time and all of that. So, but that's why the questionnaire is extremely important part of the process. But it's our imperfect part. You cannot do an interview, though, without a release. You know, I think in some of the literature that I handed out, they were talking about getting the release after the interview. We don't do the interview unless the release is done. It's extremely important because you have no rights to that, and that means your effort is wasted because people can change their mind. And so that's why we, you know, go about that. And if you know, have difficulty or come across a difficult situation, you have to call the office immediately because people, you know, forget or, you know, they don't want to do it or, you know, but we haven't had that many problems. When we've had problems, we've had problems. and nothing's going to move. I know that Ernest Withers, they called, Crystal was in tears. You know. I said, okay, I'll take it on. I got no place with them. And we got it situated after a day later. So with that.
Well, for instance, with Withers, we actually had to leave because we couldn't get the release, and then we went back another day on the same trip.
He wouldn't sign it, or?
He wouldn't sign it.
Not the first time.
No, what happened is that his agent had actually contacted us, and we had been already told, several people had said, you should do Ernest Withers, you should do Ernest Withers. So he'd agreed, but I guess maybe he forgot he agreed. So he has this agent. So I had put a call on the agent when, you know, I had no success with him. And then I was getting off a plane someplace and, you know, he was very apologetic. And they were all set to leave Memphis. I ruined their trip. I'm like, no, you got to do Ernest Withers before you leave. So they went over, and finished them. But
Well, here's a practical question on press releases. Is it generally a good?
No, not press release.
I mean the releases. Is it generally good practice? You don't mail these ahead of time.
We do.
You do.
We mail them ahead
Okay.
of time.
Because
Everyone gets.
you don't want to set up the lights, the camera, then present them.
No,
and then
no.
say,
Very
no.
few, I hate to say it, but at least half of our history makers don't read the information.
Right.
They know, they agree on the phone, and then that day they pull the envelope out.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
they say, oh, I didn't know I had to fill out all this,
Or I didn't, or the camera crews were constantly saying, what is Crystal telling them? Because they can't be telling them about photos. People are like, photos? What do you mean photos? And men never bring photos. I have no photos. I said, okay.
and then even once you tell them, you have to remind them, like 2 days beforehand, because they forget.
Right.
And then on the photo thing too, we find ourselves walking around in the office or someplace pulling them off the wall, as we,
Right.
we collect them. So when you go into a situation, we ask about the photos, we ask about the release, ask about the questionnaire, and then what's not done, we try to move on it as fast as we can to, get some of it done. At least the release and the photo. The questionnaire takes a little time, they may have to mail that later, but, we try to.
Right. But the more that it's efficiently done, the better. We try to do our interviews in one setting. That doesn't always happen. I've had, mine seem to have been going into threes, but I have some long-standing ones I haven't finished, like John Lewis. This will be like 3 years ago. So, when the people are busier, it's sort of harder. And then we had this whole thing at the beginning where we were saying 2 hours, and then people were very receptive. So Crystal would say an hour, hour and a half.
Yeah.
And then I would forget that she had said, that we had written that, and they would say, how long is this? And I said, 2 to 3 hours. And they would, ready to go for the door. And so we sort of got it together a little bit more, but once you get people talking and engaged, I think, only one person that I've done so far that kept me within time, because she said I couldn't come back, and I had to, do it in that time, and that was Marion Lido. So I got it done efficiently. And so we worked it together.
Also, the more you know about the person ahead of time, the better your interview would be, because the better focused your questions can be.
Right.
If you don't know, then,
You're sort of playing, because you have to do some fishing if you don't know. You're just, and that's an uncomfortable feeling. I hate really going in unprepared. But, and then, regionally, I have felt stretched. And like, I should never be doing a sports interview, ever. If I read the sports pages 2 times in my life, it's been a lot. Yes. And so, I'm okay on the personal part, but when it gets to the career, I'm like, I can't even put things in context. So you have to realize your strengths, but the difficulty of what we are doing here is we have 15 different categories. There's not a category we won't cover. So how can one person be expert in those categories? It's a big challenge. And this week we are going to have some local historians coming in to talk to you about their research. I would like to do like Blackslide did Henry Hampton, so he had a lot more budget. But I've talked, extensively to the person who was his executive producer about how they did it, but they would have, what they call school days. History days, and they would bring in experts and have them talk. And you have to, if you're going to be doing interviews for us, commit yourself to being broad in knowledge. I find most people, when I talk to people who want to be potential interviewers, they know maybe the community areas or arts or education. Business seems to be a big missing factor. Not many people. And business people are different. They are not sort of warm and cuddly, and you can miss some basic questions. Like, I'm okay with the business interview, give me, investment banker, I can be conversant. Give me a lawyer, because my background, I can be conversant. But, doctors, that, they can get into a little, a lot of technical language, but you have to really know how to work your way through, and and that's the whole thing of how you source things and how you build things. If you're doing a subject matter, oral history, you can start out with no knowledge And by the end of that project, you are going to be a walking encyclopedia because you're interviewing on the same subject, the same period of time, and everything starts fitting together. This is different. But the fascinating thing about this is that there are interesting ways that the community is woven together and people's names arise in sort of surprising things. It's a wonderful thing, really to do and sort of experience. Okay, what I'd like to do, Edwin, can we go to you next? I want to, you say it's better if it's divided into two groups?
Yeah, I think it might be that way. We'll see a little later.
Okay. I've talked about the grant. I want him to just show you what the digital archive is. I'd like, though, this is really important for us here, because how we go about indexing is, we're still trying to sort of figure out. And we don't have much time with this grant. So while you're here,